Before we begin this afternoon's hearing, I will hand Deputy Assistant Secretary McCurk an envelope and ask that he please deliver it to Secretary Kerry. These are my previous letters to Secretary Kerry pleading for the United States to help the residents of Camps Ashraf and Liberty and to prevent another deadly attack like the one from September at Camp Ashraf, which left 52 dead and 7 hostages who are still missing. Also, a video taken by the residents of Ashraf during the latest assault that I urge Secretary Kerry and all members of this subcommittee to view. 2 years ago next month, the United States withdrew our last troops from Iraq, and the American mission in Iraq formally ended. Yet shortly after our last soldier left, President Obama addressed troops at Fort Bragg and said, quote, "We're leaving behind a sovereign, stable, and self-reliant Iraq," end quote. However, what we have seen over the past 2 years, and it has been even more pronounced in the past few months, is that Iraq is far from stable, and it is only getting worse. And with the United States no longer there to act as a deterrent, Iran has quickly moved in to fill the void that we left behind. This is a very serious cause for concern and a real threat to U.S. national security interests to the region. Maliki and his government have done little to prevent or stop Iranian arms supplies from being flown over Iraq to Assad and his murderous forces in Syria. I've repeatedly urged the administration to press Maliki to be more proactive in stopping these flights that carry military personnel, arms, and equipment to Assad, yet the flights continue. Another example of Iran's influence in Iraq is the continued attacks against the people of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty, who, despite being guaranteed safety and security from the government of Iraq and the United Nations, have faced several deadly attacks against their compounds this year, while agents of Tehran attack their camps without repercussions and without Maliki making any effort to stop the violence. The U.S. must press Maliki and the UN to live up to their obligations under the December 2011 Memo of Understanding and protect the residents of these camps. The U.S. must not commit to increased security assistance until Maliki and the Iraqi government show that they are serious about combating the terrorist threat, will provide security to the Camp Ashraf and Liberty residents, and are willing to implement the reforms needed in Iraq to bring democracy and stability while also securing U.S. national security interests.
Iraq can play a critical role in resolving the conflict in Syria, stopping the spread of extremism, preventing nuclear Iran, and encouraging new regional partnerships. Furthermore, by virtue of its geography and history, but I'm troubled by Prime Minister Maliki's neutrality in the Syrian conflict. I'm worried that Iraq is increasingly susceptible to Iranian influence. Earlier this spring, many of my colleagues joined me in sending a letter to Secretary Kerry that expressed our serious concerns that Iranian flights were continuing to use Iraqi airspace to transport weapons to Assad's forces in Syria.
Mr. Rohrabacher is recognized.
Thank you very much. Madam Chairman, Iraq is now an ally of the Iranian mullah dictatorship. The Maliki Iraq regime is at best an accomplice to the murders of unarmed refugees at Camp Ashraf. These ingrates should not receive one penny, not one red cent of American aid.
Mr. McCurk, thank you for your testimony, and you testified in your written statement that it is legitimate to question Iraq's independence given Iran's ongoing use of Iraqi airspace to resupply the Assad regime. Why is Iraq not doing more to stop the overflights to Assad? Is the Maliki government trying to use this issue as a means to try to coerce the U.S. into providing Maliki more arms and advanced weapon systems? Also, you testified in your statement that the State Department is watchful of Iranian efforts to use Iraq in order to circumvent international sanctions. To what extent has Iraq been successful in that? There are reports that suggest that there are members of the Maliki government who are allowing some Iraqis to cross into Syria to join the fight. Why is the Iraqi government unwilling to stop these extremists from joining ranks with those fighting in Syria? And does the Maliki government's refusal to denounce Assad show that his ties with Iran run deep and that he does not want to upset the regime in Tehran? And lastly, at the start of the hearing, I handed you an envelope filled with letters and a video. Also, the plight of the residents of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty has been tragic, but the situation is getting worse.
Hey, this is an issue that I am tracking every single day. On the tragic attack on September 1st, I went to Iraq shortly thereafter. We worked very hard to get the remaining survivors off of Camp Ashraf where they were not safe. I visited the residents and the survivors at Camp Liberty. We are determined to keep them as safe as possible.
And the T-walls, do you think
Iraq.
that we can do more?
Yes, thank you. I just spoke with
They're just stacked up there.
Ambassador Beecroft this morning. The numbers, there's about 1,400 large T-walls now. We want to get as many T-walls in as possible. Some of this comes down to logistics. Some of it comes down to getting the right contractor. Some of it comes down to getting the right meeting in place for where the T-walls go. But there's no excuse. The T-walls need to move into the camp.
Thank you. And on Iran's influence in Iraq and Syria.
We have influence in Baghdad. Other states in the region have tremendous influence in Baghdad. The issue of overflights, Madam Chairman, I'd really welcome the opportunity to come and brief you in a classified setting.
Time is up, but we will do that, sir. Thank you. Mr. Wilson is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. As I mentioned, I'm very, very grateful that I've had two sons serve in Iraq, Army, Navy. The American people have shed blood on behalf of the people of Iraq, and we want success and hope for success. Additionally, I've had the opportunity to visit the country 11 times. I've been very impressed by the people I've met, and again, hopeful for the country. But a real tragedy has been the murders at Camp Ashraf. Since December 2008, before our government turned over the protection of the camp to the Iraqi government, Prime Minister Maliki has repeatedly assured the world that it would treat the residents humanely and protect them from harm. Yet it has not kept the promise. As 111 residents have been murdered in cold blood and more than 1,000 wounded in 5 attacks, including the September 1st massacre, what is the United States doing to prevent further attacks and greater loss of life in terms of ensuring the safety and security of the residents?
The State Department, the Secretary, has appointed a colleague of mine, Jonathan Weiner, to work this issue full-time to find a place for them to go. It is an urgent humanitarian issue, an international humanitarian crisis. And I went to the camp to meet with the survivors, to speak with the families, and I promised them to do everything I possibly could to get them to safety.
Well, I appreciate your commitment to that. After the September 1st massacre, the State Department called for an independent investigation by the United Nations. 74 days on, nothing's been done, let alone an independent investigation. Could you tell this committee whether any independent probe has been carried out or not? If so, by whom, and what is the finding? If not, why not? 5 attacks have been launched against the residents and not one person has been arrested. What do we do to maintain promises of protection?
Congressman, shortly after the attack, we worked with the United Nations to make sure that they got a team up to Camp Ashraf within 24 hours of the attack to document exactly what happened, because there was a lot of stories about what happened. They went there, took photographs of the bodies to make sure that it was documented as to how these people were killed, and there's no question about it. We have looked very closely at all of our information. I know I've had the opportunity to brief some members of the subcommittee in a classified setting, which I would be pleased to do again to update you on the information that we have. We did call for an investigation and for the UN to be involved in this process. The UN was also involved in making sure that the survivors got out of Camp Ashraf and out of harm's way to Camp Liberty.
And I've been to Camp Liberty many times, but I obviously am concerned. I appreciate your commitment, and indeed, every effort should be made to protect those citizens. Thank you.
I want to thank the chair and ranking member for the opportunity to participate in this hearing. Maliki wants our weapons, yet he allows planes to go from Iran to Syria, taking murderers and thugs and the IRGC and weapons with them. He says that he can't defend his own airspace, but he certainly has not invited Turkey, Saudi Arabia, or the United States to defend that airspace from these murderers that fly leisurely across Iraq and do their killing in Syria. Now I'd like to join with Mr. Wilson and others in focusing on Camp Liberty. You had 101 members of the MEK there. 52 were killed. That's a 50% casualty rate, roughly, or roughly 1 million times the casualty rate that ordinary Iraqi civilians have faced in the unfortunate deaths that have occurred in Iraq. Included among those who died was the brother of Asaf al-Nia, who I believe is in our audience today. The State Department has issued a statement saying, well, the Iraqi government had nothing to do with it, which to me is an incredible indictment. They have an obligation to protect the residents of the camp, and according to our own State Department, did nothing. In fact, the assailants had to get past several checkpoints in order to carry out their murders. When we were at Camp Liberty, or when we were in Iraq, Camp Liberty had 17,000 of these T-walls that protect those who live in the camp from missiles and mortars. Now there are less than 200. What have we done to make it clear to Maliki that he has to put back the T-walls and provide the defense, or will he keep the people there subject to attack?
I was just at the camp about a month or so ago, or a couple months ago, and saw it with my own eyes, and I want to get more T-walls into the camp. And I spoke with Ambassador Beecroft about this just today, and there's an agreement with the Iraqi government to, we have to get the right meeting in place, the right people there for where the T-walls are going to go, and I think we'll see more T-walls moving into the camp. But we're continuing to work it as hard as we can.
Well, we have fewer than 200. We need 17,500. I yield back. Thank you.
This whole thing makes a mockery of the commitment. Those T-walls have not been put up at Camp Liberty.
No, I do not think there are legitimate security reasons the T-walls have not been put up.
You sounded to me when I was listening to and I listened very closely to what you said, that we can't blame the leadership in the Maliki leadership for the lack of security at Camp Liberty.
No, in fact,
maybe I'm misinterpreting what you said. Now, tell me this: those troops that came into Camp Ashraf and murdered 52 unarmed MEK refugees, do you hold that this was done by a rogue element in the Iraqi army, or do you think that the Maliki regime is complicit in this murder?
I don't believe it was a rogue element. I think a lot of this goes back to the background of the situation. Camp Ashraf was seen as a forward operating base to the MEK.
I don't need a background on it. I'm not trying to find out. It's clear that we had Iraqi soldiers going in there murdering people who were unarmed, tying their hands behind their back, and then blowing their brains out. This is an atrocity. It's a crime against humanity. Now, I don't need a background to find out that there's, the background on Camp Ashraf. Do we hold that government responsible, or was this a rogue element? And if it was a rogue element in the military, what has the Maliki regime done to deal with that?
Congressman, I would welcome the opportunity to come speak with you in a classified setting and tell you everything we know about this attack, including who committed the atrocity.
I'm not asking for all the information that you know. I'm asking who we're holding accountable, and we aren't. Clearly, we are sending a message to the Maliki government that it's okay, because we're not doing anything about it. Here's a picture of a gentleman who used to work up here, and I submit this now, Mr. Chairman, for the record. A gentleman used to work right here in Capitol Hill representing the MEK, and we saw him on many occasions, and guess what? Here's his body at Camp Ashraf, where they have murdered him, brutally tied his hands behind his back, and blown his brains out. We need to make sure that if we excuse this by lack of attention, we are sending our own message as to what values we have, and we're sending other dictators and terrorists a message as well about American weakness. I am not satisfied with what this administration is doing on this issue. And one last note, Mr. Chairman, and that is, look, these people are under attack. I think at the very least, and this is my opinion right now on this, we should take the people in at Camp Liberty. Let's just take them in. Is there a reason why I'm going to have refugees? Is there some reason that we should not give them political asylum?
Do you just want to answer the question that Mr. Rohrabacher had asked you about the administration's position on asylum for these folks?
There are processes that are under discussion, and I'm happy to discuss that with you and follow up, but a legislative fix on some of these issues is something that we would look at.
Judge Poe of Texas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chair. I've been to Iraq a lot. I've seen a lot of people in Iraq, and I met with Maliki. I was with Mr. Rohrabacher. We met with Maliki, and we asked him this one question: can we go see the people at Camp Ashraf? And he said, absolutely not. In fact, he got so incensed that we asked that question when we were on a helicopter flying to the north to see the Kurds. He went through the State Department and asked us to leave the country. So when you see him get a little emotional, and me as well, here we are giving billions to a country where the President or the Prime Minister refuses to let members of Congress see what's taking place in Camp Ashraf. That's the background. 5 attacks on Ashraf and Liberty. 5 over a period of years. Not one criminal has been brought to justice. Not one. We don't even know their names or who they are. If the Iraqis were serious about investigating, they would at least bring in somebody. If those investigators worked for me when I was a prosecutor, they'd have been fired several attacks ago. These people that are here, working people, Americans, and they are concerned about people they love in Iraq. And they constantly are losing friends and family members to attacks. Meanwhile, the United States, I'm not sure what we're doing. I now understand that not any of the witnesses have been talked to about the latest attack. These are real people that are killed. And I'm sorry for the graphicness of this poster, but this has happened to the Camp Liberty, where the people were in the clinic and they were assassinated. They were tracked down and murdered. Now, we would think, being the freedom-loving country we are, that we would be opposed to this type of activity, and we would do a little bit more to pressure it, because it is our responsibility. I find it hard to believe that the Iraqi security forces were unaware of this attack when they had to go through numerous checkpoints to get to the place where they murdered these folks. The Iraqis are responsible for guarding them, and they were missing in action. They all went on a donut break at the time that these homicides occurred. They're always missing. And there's a debate about the 7 that were taken and captured. My question is, have these 7 people been rescued to your knowledge, no matter where they are?
No.
Has anybody in the State Department interrogated the survivors as far as a criminal investigation going on? Have we sent in all of the investigators that we have, or any investigators, to talk about who happened, what these people look like, et cetera, et cetera? My question is, have they been asked specifically about the murders in the camp that they survived, about who they were, what they looked like, what they said, what language they were speaking? Have they been interrogated about those basic criminal investigation questions?
We have asked the contacts with the MEK that we deal with to put their experts and those who have information in touch with our experts, particularly at our embassy, to connect some of the dots.
So what do we tell these folks, that freedom-loving folks that are, and do you know what they're waiting for? The next attack, if we don't hold Maliki accountable. I just want to make this comment. I don't know if you've seen this letter or not, but 44 of us, 22 Democrats and 22 Republicans, have sent a letter to the President of the United States saying no more money to Iraq until there's accountability for the murders in Camp Ashraf. Have you seen that letter?
I have seen that letter.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jackson Lee is recognized.
Let me thank the chairwoman for her indulgence, and as well the ranking member for his indulgence as well. I would say, Mr. Secretary, Many of us have been down this road before, and I must say that I will say that in engaging the administration, I have received 2 a.m. phone calls. I've received phone calls from the envoy who was in Iraq on these crisis issues. I also know that there are families who have not been able to be engaged with their loved ones. There are families who have seen their loved ones die in bloodshed that they have not been able to protect. There have been promises made as the camps have been moved from one place to the next where we have thought that that would have been a safe location, a safe house, and come to find out the most recent attack, bloody attack that we have experienced has really had our ire be raised. I take no back seat to trying to give Iraq every measure of opportunity to be the kind of human rights, dignified democracy that they allege that they want to be, to allow everyone to live in dignity. This is not happening. And what I want to focus on, as Mr. Wilson, Mr. Poe, Mr. Rohrabacher, on Camp Ashraf, all of them, to put it in the way of my advocacy for the administration, for Secretary Kerry, and the enormous work that's being done, and my hope for the success of his work. But there are hostages in Iraq that we must have now. There is documentation that those hostages are there. I can't imagine, with the wealth of sophisticated intelligence authorities that we have funded, who have a vast array of information about Americans, cannot pinpoint where starving Iranians, loved ones whose families are trying to save their lives after being on a hunger strike for 73 days. And so I would ask this question of you, already knowing about your heart and your concern. I will not judge you. I already know that you're committed to getting this right. Will you demand of Malachi, not next week, not months from now, but can we expect in the next 48 hours a call to the head of the government of Iraq demanding the release of these hostages and demanding for their release now? Or the documented, undeniable evidence that they are not held within the bounds of Iraq? Second, would you be engaged with, or the Secretary be engaged with, and I have spoken to Secretary Kerry, I know his heart, with Malachi to demand the security of those in Camp Ashraf for now and forever?
Congresswoman, thank you, and thank you for your engagement on all of these issues. And I know we've had conversations at particularly difficult times. I want to thank you personally. We can't pinpoint where the people are, and but I will guarantee that in my conversations with Maliki on down, the safety and security of Camp Ashraf, Camp Liberty, of where the residents are, the Iraqi government needs to do everything possible to keep those people safe. And we don't want anyone else to get hurt. We don't want any more Americans to get hurt in Iraq. We don't want any more Iraqis to get hurt in Iraq. And we don't want any more residents at Camp Liberty to get hurt in Iraq. This is an international crisis, and we need international help and support.
May I just have a moment more to follow up, Mr. McGurk, Secretary McGurk, and I hear the passion in your voice. But let me just say this. We're in an open hearing. You know where they are. Who is going to rescue them? Whose responsibility will it be to get them from where they are into safe haven? Because otherwise we're leaving Malachi now without responsibility. Let me just say that when my government speaks, I try with my best heart and mind to believe it. But I've got to see them alive and well to believe that they're not where I think they are, but they're in a pointed purse. I'm glad to hear that. But I want them to be safe, but I want them to be in the arms of their loved ones, or at least able to be recognized by their loved one that they're safe somewhere. So can that be done in the next 48 hours? Can we have a manner that indicates that they are safe?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Jackson-Lee.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank all the witnesses and the audience for your participation.
Thank you.